Welcome back, fellow shop rats. Today we're going to talk about big, stupid auction prices and how that affects people's view of what their car might be worth and what they want to ask for it if it's for sale. It's kind of a carry on from the episode we did a while ago about
I'm gonna fix it up someday.
let's watch the show intro. It's only 5 seconds. I'm Mike.
This is My Cars Shop.
Let's face it, the coverage of automotive auctions has definitely influenced how people price their cars. There are people who are realistic, and then there are people who are delusional, and then there are the rest of us that are somewhere in the middle of all of that, I suppose. I mean, let's face it, the fact is we all want to believe that our cars are worth probably a lot more than they are, although I have discovered that I tend to find I view my vehicles as worth less than what they are. It happened recently with the 47 Ford. I was doing some insurance adjustments on my coverage on that car and thought I knew what it was worth. And after I went through all of the agreed value stuff, the car is worth, even though it's not done, it's worth quite a bit more than what I expected it to be. But probably part of that is I live in a very impoverished area and I tend to fall into unknowingly many times a poverty mindset. But let's not talk about that because that's not what this is all about. I would like to say that whenever I go to sell a car, my goal is to get absolutely the biggest amount of money I can get out of it. But if I said that, I'd be lying because, as history has proven, it depends upon who's buying it. Now, I'll admit that there have been times when I've been selling not so much cars, but parts that if somebody ticks me off in the process of the negotiation, it happened a few years ago with a Slant 6 that I had. I was asking, I think I was asking $400 for it with a Super 6 intake attached to it, carburetor complete, everything was there. And if you know anything about the value of a Super 6 intake, that's a pretty good deal because the intake itself is worth $300 at least. But this guy was standing there pontificating about,
I'll give you $200 for the motor, and that intake ain't worth it, and blah 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 blah. I've seen those 340s around, and they go for blah blah blah. And that Slant 6 ain't blah blah blah, and blah 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 blah.
the irony of it was the guy was pontificating about all that standing right next to three 340s. He didn't have a clue what he was talking about. And I'll admit, I got a lot of hair on my head, but some of it was kind of standing up on the back of my neck. And I said, look, $300 for the motor. I take the intake off, 400 with the intake. I don't want to fool with it. I tell you what, $350 with the Super 6 intake. That's a steal. Oh, blah, 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 blah. And I just went, get out of here. I know what stuff is worth. I do tend to undervalue things. I ended up selling the intake to a guy in California, just the intake, for $350. And I sold just the motor minus the intake for $350. So I'm not an idiot when it comes to, by the way, the motor only had 49,000 miles on it, and it ran super phenomenal. It's the one that came out of Scoops. And I took all that money and put it back into scoops and wheels and tires and other stuff I needed for the car. That's not the point. The point is that I try to be reasonable without neglecting to consider what fair market value is. But when I sold my 31 Ford, I knew at the time that car was worth probably $10,000 at that time. But a good friend was interested in buying it, and I sold it for 7 grand because it was a friend, with the stipulation that if you go to sell it, I'd like first dibs at it. When he did go to sell it, I was broke and couldn't buy it back. But the point is that we all tend to over exaggerate the value of what something is. And if we are, how do I want to put this? If we are being realistic and consider where we live, who we're selling to, what our target market is, and so forth, we will come up with realistic prices. However, when we watch television and we see Meekum and Barrett Jackson and the other auctions that are out there, all of a sudden our eyes flash with dollar signs. I do hear a lot of people complaining. Let me use that word rather than a word that begins with B. I hear a lot of people complaining about how these auction prices have gotten people convinced of their cars and the value and yada yada yada. And that's true. It really is true to a point. But let's take just a minute or three and talk about why auction prices are so high. First of all, you have the commission that the auction house gets. I mean, it's not small, it's a pretty big chunk of the final sale of that car, which of course has to be considered into the price of the vehicle. The second thing is many, not all, I'm not saying all, but many of these cars that are going across the auction block have been professionally restored, which means big, stupid money in labor. Now, any person that's in business will tell you that if you're going to put the energy and the work into something and you're going to pay somebody, especially to do the work, and then you're going to sell it, you have to make a profit. You don't want to take a huge loss. And so that does tend to maybe what we would think for the average guy overinflate the value of a vehicle. And that's true to a point, but maybe also we tend to undervalue the work that we put into a car. Let me be clear that in my career in automotive restoration, I have worked on the 6 and 7 figure cars. And so I've done that work for other people. I've worked in restoration in hot rod shops, doing that work for other people, as well as doing our own restorations and then trying to sell those cars at a profit, because that's the whole point, right? We're not going to sell stuff at a loss. You don't stay in business very long. So when people have big, deep pockets, they also understand that to a point. I mean, let's face it. Let's talk about it. The car that's been so controversial in so many areas is the Black Ghost. Now that one wasn't restored. I admit that. But the Black Ghost sold for, by the time you put in the buyer fees and the auction house fees and all the stuff that went in, it was over $1 million, and the predictions were it was going to go for that. Now the car was unrestored. It was a survivor car and blah, blah. There's supposedly this great Detroit history. I'm not even going to enter into all of that, okay? But when you're dealing with people who have 6 and 7 figures to buy a car, it's not even so much really about what that car is worth at that point. It's about how much they want that car and how much money they're willing to part with to get it. And I think that is the most important element that most people miss when they've got their 67 Plymouth Belvedere post car sitting outside rotting into the ground, and somebody comes and wants to buy that, and they say, oh, I'd like to buy that car. I'll give you $500 for
Oh, yeah, I just saw one of those sell at the Macomb auction, and they got $75,000 for that car, and it wasn't restored. So I gotta get at least $50,000 for mine, because I know it's rusty, but it needs a lot of work.
it. That is the downside of this instant communication world that we live in, is people see what they sell for and they think, I got one of those, it's got to be worth that too. But they have no idea of the business end behind that and all that it takes to take that car to an auction house and put it across the block and what it costs to do that. And it's a different world than what most of us live in. But I do hear a lot of complaining about how those auction prices are causing everybody to buy. I wouldn't say everybody. I think most car guys are pretty well aware that that's not the world that most of us live in, and we're not looking for 7 figures for our rusty 70 Challenger, hand fabricated, yada yada. I think I know what that car is going to be worth when it's going to be done, and I'm probably undervaluing it a little, but probably not a lot. I suppose it's similar to the
I'm gonna fix that up someday.
video that we did a month ago. Be gracious, be kind, be realistic. And if you think somebody is out of their mind for what they want for that vehicle, understand that it could be emotional. There may be all kinds of other factors that you haven't considered. But don't belittle somebody because they think what they have is worth $1 million. Be honest and say, I respect your view on what that's worth. I'm not willing to pay that. Here's my phone number. If you want to talk about a realistic price and I can explain to you why this would be a realistic price, I'd love to have that conversation with you, but I respect your view of what that car is worth. That's not something I'm willing to pay. We really do have two different worlds when it comes to doing cars, right? There's the professional world, which, these guys got to make money. That's what they're there. They're there to keep their doors open on their shop, and they're to pay their employees and cover all their expenses. And at the end of the day, the business owner expects to make a profit, a good profit. And I can tell you, as a business owner, the stress and pressure and everything that goes with all of the I have to deal with in owning a business, I'm not sure there's enough money that makes it worth any of it at all. Now, my personal view with my business is I want to make sure that my people are extremely well compensated for what they do. That doesn't mean I pay top dollar, but we're in an extremely tight market right now where we live, and I do the best I can to take care of my people, and they know that, and I believe they have some respect for me because I'm pretty much the lowest paid guy on the payroll. But not everybody feels that way. But the point is the stress, everything a business owner has to go through, everything that the taxes, the hidden costs, the insurance is astronomical. And when you're doing this stuff professionally, you really don't have a lot of choice. And the smart buyers, the guys with the deep pockets, they recognize what they're paying for is the craftsmanship, it's the work, it's the quality, it's the if they were to take that vehicle unrestored and take it to XYZ shop, they're probably going to pay as much as what they're paying at auction or more. Now, I'm not in the world of people who can, dump $1 million on a toy. I have friends that are in that world. I know people that are in that world. I know people who can dump a million or five on toy cars and not bat an eyelash at it. But that's not where most of us live. So if you encounter somebody who has that idea that, I have one and one just like that sold at Barrett Jackson and yada, 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 if you're careful, if you're tactful, if you don't come across like an ashtray, you may be able to enter into a conversation and help them understand why those cars sell for the money that they do. Again, to me, it's all about communication and building relationship with people and maybe giving a little education to people on that's not the world that most of us live in. And you're selling your 73 Dart out by the road, you're not going to get $75,000 for that car. You're probably going to get more of a realistic price of 25. It's a beautiful car and it's well done and yada yada yada. You don't want to offend people because they won't listen to you. But if you're careful, you can help educate people on the difference between the big stupid money world and the world that most of us live in. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. I've been thinking about this one for quite a while. Terry, who's a channel viewer, mentioned that he was interested to hear my take. Well, Terry, that's my take. I hope it makes some sense. We'll catch you on the next one. Oh, don't forget, it's important. Rah!